Where do you see the importance of authorship within design work?
Would you say that that was collective authorship or my authorship?
We can do both, I think.
Well, I think there is a little bit of a kind of hopefully it's healthy competition, but within just if you were to just take the studio, the little box that is the studio, I think everybody holds some importance on that's a piece of work that I have done, and so I think people are kind of quite attached to the piece of work they're doing, and so yeah, like that's important. But when the authorship outside of this studio, well, as soon as something leaves these doors, really, it becomes something we've done. And only I really know that I've done it, you know. But I guess, yeah, I don't know, because we've been going through this whole process of re-promoting ourselves to the world and like really assessing what it is we're doing. Do people like it? And within this city, like I'm bound to say, within this city, I think we produce the best work. I do. Like I think we're doing pretty good. I don't think I'm amazing. I just think that the work that comes out of this studio, the process that it has to go through, it's pretty good. So like, I like people to know when we've done something. But in the studio, yeah, although there is a little bit of competition and people like to go, that was my idea. Once the wheels are all turning, at that point, like let's say you go, well, the original idea was mine, great. But then once the wheels are turning and it's got to be done and everyone's involved, I then quite like the fact that we're all working on stuff. Like we all work on, like the idea that's on the wall there for the chicken restaurant, the idea they've ended up going with was something that I started. It's kind of slightly different now, but I can look at that and go, well, if I wasn't here, my DNA is in that project, and that's really nice. I think that's really good, and I hope it works. Because if it doesn't, then I feel, my DNA's in that project. But now, like other people are working on it, then once it goes out there, it's a piece of our work. But I don't know, what do you mean by authorship? I don't know whether I'm answering the question.
No, I think you are. I think what I'm trying to draw from you is, if it was a film, for instance, or a series of films, could you see a very clear distinction between one project and the next and the next? That's all Lee Davies, that's all Peter and Paul. Regardless of what the actual project is, whether it's web design or print or some clients are completely different. Can you spot one studio's work, identify them through the work rather than the client?
Usually, yeah. I mean, I think the thing with us is that the thing that we basically, you have to have in every project, it's like a bit of a philosophy of the studios, there has to be an idea in every project. And Paul will all describe different ways of why that's important. Paul will talk about like really massive things like the human race invented the wheel, and it's how the human race gets better all the time through ideas. I don't look at it like that. The way I would always surmise why they're really important in every piece of work that we do is that it's like, if you met someone at like the pub or at a party or whatever, if you've got something interesting and memorable to say, they'll probably start engaging with you, and they might even remember what you've got to say, and they might even start telling somebody else if it's really engaging. And that's the idea thing. And whatever we do, whenever we've done any project, I think that I can always tell it's us, because it's the thing that there's a creative idea in there. And that really comes from Pete and Paul, really. I was a bit like that before I came, and now I'm really like that. That's kind of, sometimes I don't mean it has to be wacky ideas. Sometimes the idea is just a clever way to make a W out of two things. You know what I mean? Like out of some, I don't know, an antlers. And that's the little idea, and then everybody goes, all right. Because in here, I think that work doesn't even go to the next stage until the idea's been had somewhere.
And that's the signatures, you think?
I think it is, yeah. Whereas, say, DR, who work a lot in Sheffield, you can always tell their work's quite conceptual, but you can always tell it's different to ours, because Ian's work's quite like, visually it's different, because he seems to work in quite like a glitched, everything looks like it's broken and glitched. We're not really like that. I don't think we've got a visual style, although we probably have that. I've not spotted. So there's that, and I think that a lot of his work's quite political as well, and it's quite, because he did philosophy, so a lot of he did a load of things in the 90s that were like buy, consume, all that stuff. But like we're not really like that. We're a bit more like client need, clever idea comes out like this. Like when we did the tramlines thing to start off with, and it's been a bit, we made a rod for our own back. It was a free festival, and we ran with this campaign that was called the Free for All Music Festival, and it kind of like that double meaning thing worked for them. They really liked it, and in a way they've taken that on over the years, even though now you pay for it. It's become their like back of the mind ethos, and they are quite like irreverent, and it was that idea that created that, I think, and that's how I can tell we've done a piece of work. It's that, what's the central idea? Because if there isn't one, we'd probably very rarely do a piece of work that hasn't got one, really.